Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my podcast. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. There are new photos out that were released in the Bryan Kohberger investigation from inside Bryan Kohberger's apartment, also from inside his office at Washington State University. I'm going to go through all the new photos with you in this edition of Brian Entin Investigates. Hey guys, so the latest batch of photos connected to the Bryan Kohberger investigation have now been released by Idaho State Police. ISP is one of the agencies that investigated the murders, and they have slowly been releasing documents and also photos. And the latest batch of photos to come out, and there's like almost 700 of them, are mostly from Bryan Kohberger's apartment, which is in Pullman, Washington, which is where Kohberger lived, which is where Washington State University is, which is where he was getting his PhD in criminology. And I've been to the apartment. I had never been inside, but it's basically in graduate housing. So it looks like a regular apartment complex, but it's a place where mostly graduate students live who are going to WSU. And so they're like little apartments. And every time I went there, every time I would go to cover something in Moscow, like a court hearing or whatever, I would usually try to make a drive over there to WSU just to see if anyone else had moved into the apartment, because I always wanted to get in just to look around. But every time I went there, and this was like up until a year or more maybe after the murders, WSU had just left it totally vacant. So I talked to all the neighbors, but I was never able to actually get inside the apartment. So this is my first look. And by the way, it was on the second floor, so I could never really look in the windows or anything. So this is my first time seeing inside the apartment, and I'm going to go through all of the photos that I thought were interesting in this video. And just keep in mind, a lot of this stuff is sort of just like routine stuff that you would see in an apartment, but I still want to show you guys everything. So let me start here in the living room. There's a lot of photos of the closet. Typical stuff. You can see there's a vacuum. There is a broom and a dustpan. There's a lot of clothes hangers. There's nothing really hanging in the closet there. There's a part of the closet, and obviously they photograph everything because, so when they first went in with the search warrants, which we happened to be outside during that too, they don't know at that point what's going to be relevant, what's not. So they photograph everything at that time. That's why we have photographs of things that, now that we know more about the investigation, aren't necessarily relevant, but at that time they don't know. So they photograph everything. So you can see there's like all of these just papers piled up in one end of the closet, what looks like an Amazon box, like some kind of like screws and stuff, hardware stuff. This picture here is of the like the TV stand, and there's some shelving under it. And it's interesting, they blacked out a couple of things. You see these two black boxes here. I think these are maybe greeting cards, but I'm not really sure exactly what they blacked out there. There's a lot of photographs of books here. This is a criminal justice book, Practice and Process. It looks like it's the 4th edition. So you'll see a lot of his textbooks here. This one looks like it's unopened. There's also a lot of photographs of his research papers that are graded with notes from professors. And I just want to give you a heads up on this. There's a lot of photographs of the research papers and a lot of different papers. So I'm going to do another video on those later, just because that's going to take me time to go through. And I've got a couple experts that I want to send the papers to see if there's anything that stands out to them, just because like I'm not an expert in criminology and I want to really understand whether any of the stuff in the papers is relevant, whether what the professors wrote is relevant. So like later this week, I'm going to do another really deep dive into the papers, into the grades, he actually like commented on some of his fellow students in some of these papers. So like, I don't want to just rush through that. So in terms of the research papers, which there's a lot of photographs of, I'm going to get back to those a little later. So moving on, you can see more from under the TV stand. There's a lot of textbooks piled up there. So they have all the books laid out here. You can see research methods in the social and health sciences, America's Safest City, criminal procedure, law and practice, trial by jury, why the innocent plead guilty and the guilty go free. The other paradoxes of our broken legal system, charged, convicting the innocent, mass incarceration on trial, a trial by jury, a book called Crazy, Rise of the Warrior Cop, Unsafe in the Ivory Tower, and then there's some other kind of like letter that I can't quite read. It's not zoomed in enough. But it's interesting sort of looking at all of these textbooks, and at least what I thought when I first started looking through these photos and seeing the textbooks and the research papers is all those times that I was sitting in court and there was all of this procedural stuff happening and the talk about the plea deal. It's just interesting to think back about that time and then kind of think about these papers and these books that he was reading and the fact, I mean, we knew he was getting his PhD in criminology, but it just, I made the connection when I saw this that he really did understand everything happening in court. I mean, he was an expert on these things based on his studies. So people who think that he like got pushed into the plea deal or something, I mean, he clearly fully understood everything that was happening based on his studies and just based on all of these books that you can see that he had. So let me keep going through the photos here. Here is, oh, this, by the way, kind of skipping around here, but this is an outdoor storage locker, which I had seen when I was there. So they went in and photographed that. It doesn't look like there's anything relevant that they found inside the storage locker. Another picture of the closet here. This is a different closet. You can see he's got some clothes hanging in this closet. This is his living room, really just sort of bare bones. You can see he has like a couch, coffee table. You can see there's a Swiffer in the background, but pretty bare bones, like not really anything that personal. Another view here, you can see the TV stand again and the TV. What's interesting and what's blacked out again, which I'm going to get into more detail in a second here, and I have close-ups of the greeting cards, which I'm going to get to in a second, but I'm pretty sure these are greeting cards that he displayed out on his TV stand, which it had been his birthday, it seems like. So I don't know. I think he just put the cards out that he got for his birthday, which also is something that I noticed. And I was texting with one of my colleagues about this. You know, he pled guilty to murder. You know, when I would see him in court, it was hard not to sort of look at him as just like this awful murderer, which he is, but something about him putting the cards out, like that human factor, because that's like something that I've done. I don't know why, it just like is strange to think about him being this awful killer, but at the same time, like I'm assuming these greeting cards are from his family. And again, I'm going to go into close-ups of the cards in a second, and the fact that he thought to display those kind of goes back to these long conversations that he would have with his mom and dad, and clearly a very close relationship with them. There's some receipts here that Safeway receipts, which is like a grocery store. Light Life is on one, which I think is like a non-meat kind of food. Silk, which is like, you know, non-dairy, like soy milk. And then there's coffee. I mean, nothing really that stood out to me that was too interesting there. Also a Walmart receipt. There's a glove in the closet that they have an evidence marker by. So they obviously thought that was interesting and relevant. There's also, I think in one of the receipts I saw that he bought black gloves. I don't know if it was like for cleaning or whatever, because it never seemed relevant to the case in all the documents that I read. But there is a black glove there. This is kind of interesting. All of these look like parking tickets from Washington State University that are all lined up. And then I think he was like disputing them, which is what these letters are. Maybe that's what that is. I'm trying to zoom in. Or this may have been some kind of dispute he was having with his bank. But you can see all of the parking tickets there that he had. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Checks and bank statements here that are redacted out. Also a receipt from Moscow and Pullman Building Supply, where it looks like he got some cleaning supplies, a Swiffer, and some other items from Moscow and Pullman Building Supply. So this is interesting. This is a letter from Washington State University, an improvement plan dated November 2nd, 2022. And remember that Bryan Kohberger was having issues at Washington State University, which we now know about. I mean, if you go back to one of my videos, which I'll link in the description below, when I did the deep dive into those hundreds of pages that were released a couple weeks ago, there were a lot of interviews that were documented with Bryan Kohberger's classmates and colleagues at Washington State University who had been complaining about his behavior and the way he was acting in class. And there were female classmates and colleagues who were scared of him. So I think this may relate back to that. That says Washington State University, Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology, College of Arts and Sciences Improvement Plan, Bryan Kohberger, November 2nd, 2022. Meet weekly with supervisor at established meeting time. Keep track of weekly hours and provide report to supervisor. Establish weekly goals with supervisor and discuss whether previous week's goals were met during each weekly meeting. Make sure weekly goals are progressively harder to ensure progress throughout the rest of the semester. So again, goes back to issues that he was having at WSU, and he was on some kind of improvement plan. So these are interesting. These were also put into evidence because you can see the evidence markers 2 and 3, more receipts. These are from Walmart. Sticky rice. I mean, again, some of this stuff is just has nothing to do with the case. Sticky rice, hash browns, mozzarella, some kind of like vanilla yogurt. Some of this stuff is bar soap. It's hard to figure out what some of this stuff is just based on what's on the receipt. Again, more food, treatment cold, men's furnishing for $21.99. What else is here? Yeah, food. But it's, again, they cataloged everything in the apartment, which is why you can see the evidence markers. This was kind of interesting. This is like bear spray that he had ordered, which we know he apparently liked to go hiking and stuff. So maybe that's why he had the bear spray. Let me go into some of these close-ups of the card, though. Again, a picture of the card blacked out next to the TV. This one, you can see the front. So it's a greeting card that has like a man on top of what looks like a dinosaur, and then someone wrote both of your egos with arrows at at the dinosaur and at the man, and then under it it's written, you are it looks like a pine and professor, LMAO, like laughing my ass off. I think that's what that says, pine and professor. Someone wrote that, and then the greeting card says, speak softly and carry a big stick unless you can ride a dinosaur, then do that instead. Theodore Roosevelt, U.S. President. And then you can see on the inside of the card, it says 11/21/22, which would have been after the murders. So they didn't black that one out. You can see, and then they've got more pictures of the front of the card, which he had displayed on the, and then on the inside, when they open the inside, you can see it says happy birthday, and it says Bryan, which I don't know why it's spelled like that, Bryem, maybe that was like a nickname, and it says happy birthday, but then they blacked out the personal message, which it's kind of interesting that they blacked out the personal message. I wonder like what statute I don't know why that would be considered like confidential at this point, but they did black it out. You can see the outside of the card, happy birthday, Bryan. This looks like it's from a different person, a different card. And then the outside says, a son leaves your home, but never your heart. He discovers his own happiness, which in turn becomes yours. So that is obviously a card from his mother, which it seems like was also displayed out on the TV stand, which again goes back to these, I mean, he would have these daily calls. Remember when I interviewed, and again, it's another video that I did, which you can go look back at, but I interviewed the experts who the FBI consulted to go through his phone, and he would have these really, really long conversations with his parents. So it doesn't surprise me that he had a greeting card from his mom that he had displayed out on the TV stand, because he was seems like very, very close to his parents. So that's the card. Let me go into the kitchen now. Just a picture of the sink. Everything's very clean for the most part in the apartment, by the way, which isn't surprising considering we know that he has like OCD. So the sink area, you can see there's tools in one drawer, like screwdrivers, tape, that kind of thing. All the pots and pans that are underneath in the counters. The stove, which is very, very clean. And they're older apartments, by the way, when I was out there. It's not like this is a new building. In his cabinets, there's some like olive oil, some like snacks and stuff. Looks like some kind of chocolate, biscotti, granola. I think that's granola. Let's see what else. In this cabinet, like chips, ketchup. Looks like maybe like bread or bagels that are in a Ziploc. More like bread that's in a Ziploc. Again, a lot of this I'm not doesn't really have anything to do with anything now that we know in terms of the investigation, but I thought maybe you guys might find it interesting. In the freezer, there's like vegetarian pizzas, frozen foods, more close-ups of that stuff. Beyond Meat, which is, we know he was a vegetarian, requested vegetarian meals in jail, which I reported on. In the refrigerator, tofu, more vegetarian stuff, hummus, and then there's kind of a wide angle of the kitchen where you can see that it's, again, he's pretty organized. Everything is really clean. Picture the countertops, coffee makers, that kind of thing, microwave. So weird seeing inside again. I was outside so many times trying to get inside, and I never got to see the inside, so it is kind of interesting for me. The bathroom, again, very, very clean, no toilet, trash can. This is, of course, where that selfie was taken, that really freaky selfie that we were able to obtain a couple months ago through some of the court documents. So this is the spot where that was. You can see there's no shower curtain there that I can tell. The bathtub, which is really clean. And then this is kind of interesting. You can see there's this evidence marker that says 8. It looks like there's a hair there. And when I went through the search warrant initially, there were several hairs that were found. So, and I don't, from what I know through the court documents and through being in court, nothing ever connected back to the murder scene. But this looks like one of the hairs that they found that I read about in some of those documents. So that's the bathroom. Let's see what else here. We already did the living room. Oh, bedroom. Okay, you haven't seen the bedroom yet. So this is the bedroom. Again, pretty barren. You can see he's got a workstation with his computer. His bed is there in the background. Again, kind of just depressing looking. Like there's no like pictures on the walls or anything. There's a close-up of the bed. And then also another evidence marker, number 11 here. This looks like it's on the sheets, and it is another hair, which goes back to what I saw initially in the search warrants when they said that they found hairs. There's another hair there on the bed. Let's see what else. So I showed you the card, the bedroom. We went in the bathroom, kitchen. We did the living room. Oh yeah, this is now his office. So his office, you can see the outside door here, office number 12. Again, another place that I went to that I was never able to get inside, but it's in the basement of the criminal justice part of Washington State University. It's this big building. His office was down in the basement. It was all open to the public, so I went there also several times. I mean, it's a public university. I went down there. No one ever wanted to talk to me at that time. I talked to fellow professors and stuff, and they were really nice, but no one ever really wanted to go on record with me, which looking back does kind of make sense now, because at that time I talked to a couple of students who told me that he was a problem and that he was intimidating and that people didn't like him, but now we know the extent of it with all of these police reports that have been made public. So it makes sense now that none of the professors really wanted to talk. Also, at the time that I went there, the plea deal wasn't done, and they were probably nervous to talk ahead of the trial. Again, these are all people who are experts on criminal justice, so they knew all about the legal proceedings and that kind of thing. So anyway, his office number 12, you can see it actually says Bryan Kohberger. And I think when I went there, they had taken that sign off because I don't remember seeing his name on the door. Inside, again, pretty basic. This, again, is the area where like people would say they didn't want to be alone in the office with him, that kind of thing. And again, it was down in the basement. And you can see it says Kohberger on the whiteboard. And they also blacked some things out there, which makes me wonder what else is on that whiteboard. And then there's sort of a a picture from back where you can see his desk, and just like some notes above, which are kind of hard to see exactly what they are, and a couple more books. So it looks pretty typical. Again, not a lot, like there's no pictures out on the desk or anything like that. I think that's a Starbucks cup. But yeah, that is the inside of his office. And that's really the extent of the photos from inside the apartment and the office. There were also some new photos that were released from the house from where the murders happened, 1122 King Road. I've just made the personal choice of not showing the inside of the house just because of the relationships that I have with the family and the fact that they are very bothered by photos from inside the house coming out. And I know other people have shown them. I've just made the decision not to show the inside. Also, I don't find, if there was something super relevant, I would show it because, I mean, first comes first, I am a journalist, but most of the stuff has already been described in police reports. And so there's really nothing of interest. There's a couple more photos from inside the house that I didn't really find to be, like it's like a photo of the couch inside the kid's house. Nothing that I found to be really relevant. So those were also in this new batch. There were photos of the some of the cars outside also that were just, I've seen that before in another batch that came out, so I didn't see anything relevant with the photos of the cars. And then there were photos of this sort of outdoor area that I can't figure out where this is. Maybe someone else knows. If you know, put it in the comments. And I don't know the relevance, but it's an area where there's like some outdoor steps. Those also came out in this latest batch of photos from Idaho State Police. So that's the latest in terms of the latest photo release. I'm trying to think of what else has been going on in the case. There was this hearing last week. Madison Mogen's family and Ethan Chapin's family have both are using this lawyer to sue the city of Moscow to stop the additional release of more photos or videos from inside the house, or photos or videos that they say show death scenes. You remember there were, and again, these are not photos that I published, but they've been out. There was photos initially from in the house, crime scene photos where they blurred areas where it seemed like the bodies were, where there was blood. It was very, very upsetting to the families because you could still tell under the blur, like you couldn't tell what it was, but you could tell it wasn't good. And it was traumatic to the families. And then there was the body camera video that came out that showed the inside of the house where they really blacked things out, but all of that was traumatic to the families. So Ethan Chapin and Madison Mogen's family both hired, I think he's working pro bono, an attorney who sued the city of Moscow to stop the release of additional crime scene photos from inside the house or anything that depicts what they call death scenes. So there was this hearing. They won initially an emergency injunction to stop the further release of those sort of things. And then there was a hearing last Thursday, which I watched the whole thing. It was on Zoom with the judge. And it was the attorney representing the families and then the attorney representing the city of Moscow and the judge, where they made their arguments. And basically the attorney for the family said, look, like this is upsetting to the families. The public doesn't have a right to all of this stuff. And the city of Moscow needs to stop releasing it. The city of Moscow's attorney basically said, look, like we don't disagree that it's upsetting that we're releasing these things and we feel for the victims' families. But at the same time, like there is law in Idaho that requires us to release these things. And they talked about, they've gotten so many requests, and by law, they're like, we have to, whether we agree or not, we have to release these items. Or they could be sued by just regular citizens or by members of the media or different news organizations, whatever. So they were making the argument of why the photos and videos need to be released. The family was saying, like, look, don't do it. And basically the way the hearing ended is the judge said, okay, let me take it under advisement. I'll issue a written ruling at a later date. But for now, the emergency injunction will stand. So the city of Moscow for now will not release anything that depicts death scenes or that, is inside the house where the victims were found. In my experience covering other murders, usually photos of the bodies are not released. That doesn't count under public record. Autopsy photos are normally not released. The media has had access to those things before through other means. Sometimes, like if there's a civil lawsuit or something, they'll come out that way, or like an attorney related to the civil lawsuit may have them and give them to a member of the media for whatever reason. I think one of the issues here is, like, back in the day when there was only a couple of news organizations that would be covering something like this, and they could make the decision of, okay, well, we got these photos, but we're not going to show these because it's inappropriate. Whereas now, and nothing against, like, I mean, there's amazing people who, don't work for big media organizations that cover the case, but some of them are irresponsible. And some of the big media organizations are irresponsible too, and just want to publish everything. So it is kind of it's a tricky subject. That even for me is tricky, because I obviously sympathize with the families and have gotten to know the families, and I don't think that some of these photos should be made public. But at the same time, as a member of the media, I also lean towards the public getting access to things. And this is actually something that the attorney representing Moscow brought up. There are all these conspiracy theories in the Bryan Kohberger case, and there's conspiracy theories about everything these days. And by releasing the evidence that the court had, that police had, that was going to be part of the trial, by showing the public everything, you can sort of tamper down those conspiracy theories and you make things public. And I just in general do believe that when things are brought into the light, it's good for the public, because it doesn't feel like anything is a secret or wasn't released because of some shady reason. That being said, obviously there's no reason that anybody needs to see photos of the victims' bodies or of the death scenes. That's sort of the way that I personally feel. So it'll be interesting to see how the judge rules. Again, she said, for now, the temporary emergency injunction will stay in place, so the city of Moscow can't release more stuff related to that until she makes a final ruling, which I suspect will be pretty soon. She has to go back and look at the case law. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is something that I posted a video on TikTok yesterday. Like, so many people are still invested in this case, and so am I. And I think because there wasn't a trial, people feel like there's still information that they want to know about. And I get that. And that's one of the reasons I keep doing these videos. But just in terms of like the conspiracy theories and people writing bad things about the victims and the survivors, I just want people to know that that really does have an impact, and because I am close with some of the family members, and they see a lot of those things and comments that people post. So just keep that in mind. Like, I know people do it anonymously and whatever, they don't really care. No one knows who they are. They'll write these awful things, but just keep in mind that that the victims' family members do read these things, and it's very, very hurtful for them. And imagine, like, if you lost a family member, or, and you're in that trauma, a lot of times, not only in this case, but in other cases I've covered too, people will, they're up late at night. They're still dealing with this. This still takes up, such a big part of their brain, even though there was the plea deal and everything, like, they're not over it, obviously. So, they'll be up at night reading comments and reading news articles and new information that's come out. And when they see those things, it really is really hurtful to them. So I just hope people will realize that this isn't just like some video game. This isn't just like some, book that you're reading or something you're fascinated with that doesn't involve real people. It does involve real people. And when you comment or you say awful things, just keep in mind that people connected to the case, survivors and victims' family members, do read those comments, and it is very, very hurtful. So I hope people will keep that in mind. I'll keep you guys posted as more stuff comes out. Again, I'm going to do a deep dive later this week on the research papers that are photographed from in the apartment. And there's a lot of them, but I don't want to just, it's a little more complicated, I think, in terms of what they might mean in connection to the bigger picture. So I want to go through them really carefully, and I want to get some expert opinion before I put anything out on those. So, yep, that's the latest. Thank you guys for watching. Please click to subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.